Hey everyone, I want to welcome you to a little Facebook Live I wanted to put together to give you kind of an idea and an update on tomorrow's podcast episode. We have kind of a special podcast episode, so welcome to those who are joining us on the feed. We are doing this live on Facebook and YouTube and also on our Instagram channel as well, but I can never trust Instagram. So if you are watching us on Facebook or YouTube, let us know where you're listening or watching from. We'll let a couple of people jump in as we kind of give an update as to why I'm doing a little bit of a Facebook Live ahead of an episode. No, it's not something I normally do when I release a podcast episode, but for a handful of you, you have been following the story that I'm going to feature tomorrow with Jeremy Adriano and Randy Wellbaum. Now they're a married couple who live in Logan, Utah. They were excommunicated for being faithful Latter-day Saints attending their ward in Logan a month after they were married. So it's unbelievable to me that a month after this active Latter-day Saint couple was married, their bishop and stake president rushed an excommunication through. The reason why I want to talk about this is because it seems like now that COVID is the restrictions from COVID are lifting, stake presidents and bishops throughout Zion have received a charge to go out and start excommunicating Mormons who don't look like them, namely Mormons who are in same-sex marriages. So I want to talk about that a little bit today. Let some of you guys know what we're focusing on in terms of this topic, because it isn't just Jeremy and Randy's story that has been highlighted on this whole excommunication purge that I'm seeing within the church, but there are 11 other couples who also have come forward saying they also have received almost verbatim a letter or a visit from their stake president or bishop regarding this topic. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. First, where's Jennifer Pearson watching from Portland, Oregon. Matthew Allen. Hey, Matthew, how's it going? And Honolulu, Hawaii. Actually, Jay and I were just in Maui, or on Maui. We just got back from a vacation. Kind of wish I was back under the Maui sun. So aloha and mahalo for following us. Amy, welcome from Huntsville, Alabama. Amy's a big fan of the LatterGayStories podcast. Yeah, and I want to talk about that, Amy. So Amy says, just put that up on the screen here. They've been doing this through the South also. Definitely going on for many, many years. But I want to talk about what's happening kind of in the Western United States Zion purge. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this Facebook Live today, this broadcast, just so we can talk about it. And if you know of situations, or if you have received a letter as well and want to message me privately, all 11, not everyone out of this group of 11 want to be public about their story. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, why some of them don't want to be public. And spoiler alert, some of that has to do with what the church told them. Their stake presidents literally said, if you go public with this, don't even worry about a hearing. We'll just excommunicate you without any of your input, similar to what happened with Natasha Helfer. And we can talk about that as well. So again, let us know where you're watching from. And if you've got comments or personal feelings about this whole topic too, let's discuss it, because it is really strange. So for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. We are discussing an upcoming episode that I have coming on the LatterGayStories podcast tomorrow. It's premiering tomorrow at 3:00 with Jeremy Adriano and Randy Wellbaum. You may have seen their pretty passionate Facebook post shortly after. In fact, it was just a couple days, I think the Monday or Tuesday after Randy and Jeremy were excommunicated by their stake president, that they made a really heartfelt, sad, sincere post on their Facebook page that just essentially said, we were the pioneer children who sang as they walked, and they pushed their handcart all the way to Zion, and did everything right, only to be told they were no longer welcome in the church. And then the church excommunicated them a month after their honeymoon, a month after they were married. So just unbelievable. I want to talk a little bit about excommunication. I wanted to talk about their story, which will premiere tomorrow. And a little of this kind of this live event really is to try to help you see the importance of episodes like this, because I promise you, it is such a good discussion, and we're going to jump into it. Many of you sent some questions in ahead of the interview. I want to go through those questions with Randy and Jeremy to be able to give them an opportunity to respond, and then we're also going to do a Q&A after the episode. And I think that'll be super important. So again, thank you for those who are joining us. Matthew's in Virginia. Laura, hello, Laura. Good to see you again from Boise. We interviewed Laura about 20 episodes back. So if you want to jump on and see Laura's, listen or watch Laura's story, it's really great. Jerry from Long Beach, Mario from California as well. So thank you for joining us, guys and gals. So Jeremy and Randy's episode, super interesting to me. Sometimes when you get episodes like this, it starts raw. It's raw and it's candid and it hurts, because I'm trying to understand, and maybe someone here on the live can try to best understand why an organization like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would want to excommunicate people who choose to be in the pew. That's really, I think that's the part that's difficult for me to comprehend. And maybe you perhaps could and might not have an answer to that. But what does the church fear or lose in having a gay couple in a same gender relationship or marriage? What does the church lose in having them attend? And maybe the better question is, what is the fear? Like, why does the church fear people like Jeremy and Randy occupying a pew in a chapel in Logan, Utah? Thoughts? I really am interested. What do you, Alejandro, you're saying they fear that Alejandro, sorry, that it'll normalize. I can't argue with that. I actually, if you look back here, that's my June stack of the Miracle of Forgiveness. For those who follow the Trash the Stash event that we do here at LatterGayStories. In chapter 6 of that book, Spencer W. Kimball says that just talking about being gay is a way of becoming gay. So possibly, like if we see gay couples in church, does that mean that more kids become gay? Is that the fear that the church puts out there? Because there has to be some grand reason. And I want to talk a little bit about the November 2015 policy, which really kind of kicked this into high gear and caused this to be a discussion. Tyler says, I think it's more about punishing the individual. I think the pain that it puts people through is 100% calculated. I don't disagree with that. I think there probably is an element of that probably also says, like, I'm the authority here. I want to be the one who controls the narrative. And by having a gay couple in our ward, that perhaps takes some authority or power away from a bishop or a stake president. The other interesting thing, just jumping into so many episodes with the podcast, we're into 150 episodes now. The story that I hear over and over and over again from individuals who are within this space, individuals who identify somewhere along the LGBTQ spectrum, is that their personal revelation and their personal experience does not match the messaging that has come from the church over a number of years, decades. And that's that there is no happiness on this side of the aisle. There are no spiritual experiences. And that if you give in or succumb or do what the devil wants you to do, namely like get married or have a relationship or happiness or joy or companionship, if you do any of those things, you're void of spiritual experiences, void of happiness. And after 150 episodes on LatterGayStories and the even hundreds more people that I've spoken with over the years in this space, I can tell you that I think the church fears the fact that their rhetoric doesn't match the lived experiences of the people who are on this side of the aisle. There are two sides of the aisle here. The one side of the aisle is the one that they've created the narrative in. The other side of the aisle is the one that they want us to fear. I think religion sometimes operates best when it creates a boogeyman. And in all of these situations, religion is, and I don't want to say this is just something that is familiar to Mormons, but to other Christian denominations, Christianity thinks that it's smart to create a boogeyman in all topics, whether it's chastity or morality or like the word of wisdom, or even in terms of same gender marriages. We create a boogeyman that you have to fear, and when you fear that, the religious societies are able to create these divides, able to create these different aisles, and then that way they can regulate and administer boogeyman status on certain things to help keep people in line. So yeah, really interesting. Okay, I want to jump back up some of your thoughts here. Rebecca, I heard excommunication is to release people from their covenants so they aren't breaking covenants anymore. I'm not sure I believe that either, because some of the people that I know in same gender relationships, either in marriages or committed relationships, I think are some of the greatest covenant keepers. And in terms of, you think of some of the experiences that we have in the temple and the commitments that you make to give your time, talents, energy, and all of those resources to the church. Imagine the amount of talent, time, and resource the church loses by excommunicating some of these really, really great people from the church. So yeah, I like that. I don't know if I completely understand why the covenants would be thrown in there. Other than perhaps it's possible that they do look at that. I don't know. Do you think it might be this idea that we're doing you a favor? You have all these healthy or hefty covenants that you've committed to, and we're going to now do you a favor by getting you out from underneath those. I don't know. Again, welcome to the new people who are joining us. We are broadcasting on our YouTube and Facebook page, and so there's a number of you. I'll try to post comments as we go through. Ralph brings up the reason why excommunication has been so important in the church lately is because of the proclamation. Yes, I think there's probably some of that. And if you have watched our latest episode with the fathers of gay sons, we talk a little bit about the proclamation. And it's interesting that the Latter-day Saints will jump on every word and just cling on every word of the proclamation, except that line in the proclamation that said individual circumstances may require adaptation of the proclamation. So individual circumstances within a family could cause different outcomes. And there are opportunities to adapt the proclamation to our situations. So I don't know how far or how well that plays in there. All right, Lou says it's all about power, and that's it. So again, I'm asking, what does the church fear in having a gay couple attend church? And if this is an issue of sin, then why aren't all sinners being excommunicated from the church? So in a minute, I want to talk a little bit about the November 2015 policy and then its reversal in April 2019, because I think a lot of what we're going to discuss in tomorrow's premiere, in tomorrow's episode, will hinge upon what the church released in November of 2015, the backpedal, the experiences that they went through, and then when they finally updated the handbooks and the multiple revisions of the handbooks, and then when in April of 2019, they rescinded or shelved or put away the November 2015 policy. I want to talk about that because I think it plays kind of in line with this idea that if gay Latter-day Saints are being punished or excommunicated for an issue of sin, then why aren't all sinners being excommunicated and told not to attend church? And these aren't just, I think the important part of what I want to premiere tomorrow is that in some circumstances, some Latter-day Saints who were former members of the church who fell away from the church for a number of reasons, transitioned their faith, or just abandoned the church altogether, they get married, they move on, and essentially they've left the church in the rearview mirror years ago. It's one thing to excommunicate that family or that couple, but why? I guess the thing I just can't wrap my head around is why the church would excommunicate a couple who wants to occupy a pew, who is active in church and participating. That's what I want to talk about. So if it's about a sin thing, a sin issue and taking Randy and Jeremy's story in account, that they're being excommunicated for their sin of being married, then why aren't we excommunicating everyone with sin? I remember growing up as a young Latter-day Saint, and it was often said that if everyone's sins smelled like cigarette smoke, the whole chapel would stink. You remember that? Anybody else hear that in their sacrament meetings or their Sunday school classes? I think about how that would apply to this idea of excommunication. If the church is just going to start excommunicating people because of sin and specific sin, and I want to jump into what they have considered specific sin, then I think that opens up a wide variety of people who could be excommunicated. And the reality at that point then is that, no, the church isn't going to just randomly excommunicate someone for sin, knowing that everyone in the eyes of that theology believes that everyone within Mormonism is a sinner, that there is no perfect person that occupies a pew. So then it gets to the point of what becomes sinful enough to be excommunicatable, and why are they targeting specific audiences? And it's why I ask the question, like, what is the great threat? Why does the church fear a Latter-day Saint who is also gay and perhaps even in a same-gender relationship? Why do they fear them so much that they have to excommunicate them? All right, so I just want to jump through the comments real quick. Evan says, because disagreeing with the church leadership is the worst sin you can commit. Tough to argue that. Mallory, I think it's because of the level of the sin that gay marriage is considered apostasy. I want to talk about that because according to the Handbook, it is no longer considered apostasy. In November 2015, it was considered apostasy, and it's no longer considered apostasy. They specifically made a big deal about it. President Oaks made a big deal about that to ensure that people knew that it wasn't about the actual marriage creating apostasy. Evan says, in the current church leadership care a lot about being homophobic. I wish I could disagree with you. All right. This is a long one. I don't know if this is all going to pop. Yeah, it does. So everyone is a sinner in the sense that we all make mistakes. God did not promote excommunication. He promoted love through Jesus. I want to bring that up too. That was a point that I have considered over and over again is, where is Christ in the excommunication? Where are New Testament teachings? Where are biblical teachings? Where is restorative teachings within these processes of excommunication? Laura writes, when I was excommunicated, I was told it was to protect the innocent and to preserve the integrity of the church. And I would agree. I would agree with a lot of the people who are commenting below that. It is all about the church at some point. Okay, so let's jump into a little history, because for some of you who are just jumping in, especially within the space, the Mormon space, we don't really have an accurate roadmap. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we got to the point where we're going to do an episode tomorrow featuring a gay couple who was excommunicated a month after their honeymoon. It really starts in November 4th of 2015, where the church quietly adds just a little one-page update to the General Handbook of Instructions, not notifying the public at all that they have now considered same-sex relationships apostasy. And this is happening because if you remember what's happening in the United States, we have the Defense of Marriage Act, and there are amendments going all over. We had California's Prop 8, which was really popular. We had Hawaii's Prop 13, Utah's Amendment 3 that were all happening. And the United States was at a point where they were legalizing same-sex marriages. So the church comes out and they specifically say, if you are in a same-sex marriage or relationship, that is considered apostasy. And with that, in fact, I can actually, let me just pull this up because we can follow along. Give me just a second here as we chat. So not only were people who were in same-gendered relationships considered apostates, but then the church further drove a nail into your heart by saying that children Okay, here, I'll pull it up because hopefully some of you can see this. And I'm just going to read this off of a document that's called On the Record that I produced, essentially just detailing the things that are on the record regarding this topic. So on November 5th, and it's often called the November 5th policy because that's when it was leaked. A copy of this policy was leaked actually to John DeLynn, and John DeLynn distributed it out from there. But the handbook says three key changes. 1, a natural or adopted child of a parent living in a same-gender relationship, whether the couple is married or cohabitating, may not receive a name and a blessing. So one of the very first things we do is violate one of our articles of faith saying that man cannot be punished for the sins of Adam or sins of his parents. And the church immediately punishes the sin of the parents, and I air quote sin, punishes the child for the sin of the parents. Another key change, a child living with parents in the same sex relationship may not be baptized, confirmed, ordained, or serve a mission until the following few things happen. First, the ordinance is approved by the First Presidency. Second, the child specifically disavows their parents and their parents' same-sex relationship. And then third, the child moves out of the home of the same-sex parent. The third key change that we found in that policy is that any person in a same-gender marriage is now considered an apostate and should be excommunicated. And this is the interesting thing. It wasn't just a suggestion that, or jump in here and perhaps bring them in for an interview. It was that they should be excommunicated, which I think is just unbelievable. So for those people who were involved in this, it was a shock, and it really just it surprised a lot of people because that was the November 2015 policy. If you remember, then Elder Christofferson jumped in front of the camera because the uproar went crazy. There were so many people who were so interested in why the church would flip so quickly and then just jump so heavily down the throats of these gay couples, these same-sex married couples, or just the gay Latter-day Saints in general. And so he comes out just a day after the policy was leaked and does a little interview with Church PR. You can watch that interview on the record. And then a few days later, about a week after the initial November 5th policy was leaked, another clarification comes out. And this is where the First Presidency, which at the time was Thomas Monson, Henry Eyring, and Elder Uchtdorf, who were all in the First Presidency at the time. So they clarify in a second or third round that the policy would only apply to children who lived mostly with their parent in a same-sex relationship. The first go-round was that if you had a parent in a same-sex relationship, you couldn't live with them and you had to disavow that relationship. So the clarification on November 13th that came was that children who lived mostly with their parents, so the custodial parent in a same-sex relationship, that's who the church was interested in focusing on. And then those who had already received ordinances before the change had occurred. So if you had, for example, if I had a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old son living with us, we were married, and he wanted to advance into the office of a deacon, according to the November 13th update, because he was already baptized but still pending future confirmations or future ordinances, he would not be able to be ordained as a deacon. So the church wanted to make that clarification. And then the day after that clarification letter happened, then something I called the aftermath on the 14th of November. It's where about 2,000 people headed downtown to Temple Square to the church office building in a little bit of a protest, and about 5,000 people resigned their membership, their church membership on that day, which was pretty amazing. So all this is kind of detailed. In fact, it's not kind of, it's really detailed in the On the Record project. If you haven't downloaded On the Record, I invite you to, because it is really putting the LDS Church on the record in terms of messaging when it comes to LGBTQ topics. So that was kind of the foundation that was laid in terms of same-sex marriages within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then we fast forward to, there's a number of other things that happened along that line. One was a mass amount of suicides that happened. The interesting part was, and I also detail this on the record, and I could just jump over here and let you see it. But the church issued a statement because there were a number of people who were relating the November 2015 policy to suicides that were happening. All in all, there were 32 families who had reported deaths, either a child or a sibling, a family member. 27 of the suicides were men. 3 were female, 2 were transgender. Most of them happened in Utah. There were 26 of them that happened in Utah, 4 in Idaho, and 1 in Arizona, and then 1 up in the New England area. But of the 27 people, the families of those 27 deceased all claimed that the November 2015 policy had something to do with that. And so the church spokesman, Dale Jones, did speak out and provide a statement regarding that, and this was their statement. You can read it on the record, but essentially they give a pretty sugar-coated, every soul is precious, we love everyone. This is heartbreaking. Those people who are attracted to others of the same sex face particular challenges and pressures in this regard, both inside and outside of the church, and we mourn with their families and friends when they feel like life no longer offers hope. This really hurts because when I read this statement, and I remember this statement coming out, I thought, as a religious organization, wouldn't you be the first to offer hope? I would think that they would be the group that should be offering hope to people. And then the church says each congregation should welcome everyone, which again, isn't this contradictory to what they just did? They just released a policy saying that we want to kick people out and we don't want you here. But their PR statement says, each congregation should welcome everyone. Leaders and members are taught to follow the example of Jesus Christ and to reach out in an active, caring way to all, especially to youth who feel estranged or isolated. That's unbelievable to me. I think it's maddening to me that you have a church who actively is excommunicating people who want to attend services, and then they turn around and use their PR arm to say, every member of the church needs to love and invite and reach out in an active and caring way, especially to the youth who feel estranged and isolated. So that was one aspect of that was really difficult for me to wrap my head around. And then another, I do have it here on the record. I'll switch over to this other screen. So then Elder Oaks is asked about this suicide epidemic specifically. And he was in Washington, D.C., and he was specifically asked if the suicide epidemic in the church was the responsibility of the church, and if they had something to do with it, especially with the November 2015 policy. So this reporter says, less than a year ago, right here in Washington, D.C., my friend killed himself. He was Mormon and gay. And you've got on the record that the church does not give apologies. Does religious freedom absolve you from the responsibility in the gay Mormon suicide crisis? And here's Oakes' response, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. But he says, that's a question that will be answered on Judgment Day. I will be accountable to a higher authority for that. Yikes. Yikes. Isn't that crazy? Interesting. So it's kind of like the church creates a wildfire with the November 2015 policy, and then they're rushing in and wanting praise for trying to extinguish the fire, and then trying to say that they didn't start the fire to hurt people. They started the fire to try to clean out the underbrush, for example. So that was kind of the precursor. That's what led us into the November 2015 policy, where really the church started doubling down against gay members of the church. And the November 2015 policy really started solidified that. I just looking in the chats here, Evan, one of the casualties of the November 2015 policy, and it's in my personal opinion that church history is one of the leading causes of people to leave the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The second reason is LGBTQ family members and the way that the church has treated it. Great question, Matthew. Do we have stats on the number of suicides? This is really difficult. I do know if you go to On the Record, there are some link sources there. The Salt Lake Tribune did a little bit of work on that, but it's really difficult. And it's difficult to try to understand why some suicides are reported and others are not. I think one of the biggest reasons why they're not is some family members are so ashamed that their son or daughter or husband or wife identified as LGBTQ that the last thing they want to do is give that negative connotation to their deceased loved one. And again, I air quote that negative connotation. I've heard that a few times. In fact, I've heard it more than I want to be comfortable with hearing it. That family members say, yeah, I know so-and-so, and their son committed suicide who was gay, but the family doesn't want to talk about that. The family doesn't want to share that. Some obituaries are completely omit that fact. So it's difficult to say that, yeah, there is a specific reason or this is the cause, because they don't want to highlight it. Hashtag gaslighting. Yeah, and many of you are commenting that indeed that Oaks would be responsible for those. And I think his fingerprints are all over the November 2015 policy. So we get the November 2015 policy, and here's where we really do a deep dive into like the meat of what's happening here. The November 2015 policy rolls out, and it's really disastrous for the church, and it's disastrous for membership in the church. Like, raise your hand if you were a victim of, or if you were part of that group who left the church or become more nuanced in the church because of the LDS Church's treatment of LGBTQ people. It is absolutely one of the driving factors for people who left the church, and for a number of reasons. We talked about it earlier in this Facebook Live. Was that when you compare the narrative that the church was creating around LGBTQ people and looked at your own family members who were impacted by this topic, they weren't the same. They weren't the degenerate. I mean, if you can jump into the Miracle of Forgiveness over there and read one of the 28 descriptors that Spencer Kimball wrote about gay people, that they are without the Spirit, they're sons of Satan, that they're contagions, they're disease, they're a malady, they are sinners. I mean, just all of these descriptors that were used to describe gay people. But when you actually have someone who's gay in your family and you know them and you know their goodness and their tenderness, it just doesn't match with the rhetoric that you hear from the church. Then you pile on the fact that the church believes they're apostates. And if you read the handbook in 2015, they were in the same category as rapists and murderers. So if you murdered somebody, you would be excommunicated from the church. If you were in a plural marriage, you could be excommunicated from the church. Or if you were gay or in a same-sex relationship, same gender relationship, you would be excommunicated from the church. So a lot of those rhetorics just didn't add up. Yep, the 2015, Darren, yes, the 2015 policy was the catalyst for wives as well, husbands and wives on both sides of this aisle, to prevent their children from seeing their LGBTQ parent. And that was real because so many of these faithful Latter-day Saints jumped into that space and said, well, if this is what the church believes these people are, then they must be. And they were withholding children from their own parents. So it was a disastrous rollout for the church. Multiple opportunities to revise and amend what they were saying. In January of 2016, you'll remember President Nelson goes to Hawaii, to BYU Hawaii in Honolulu, Laie, and gives a devotional where he says that the November 2015 policy is revelation, that it was revelation directly from God to Thomas Monson, and then Thomas Monson to the quorum then in a united fashion approved the policy, and that's how we got it. We fast forward all the way to April 4th, 2019, and God changed his mind once again because the church reverses this policy. And this is really interesting space for many of us here listening, and many of us in the audience. You remember that day because that was when the church really rolled back one of its most disastrous policies, and it was met with some mixed feelings. But here's the interesting part. So the church comes out with a PR statement, and they say the church will no longer characterize same-gender marriage by a church member as apostasy. And they say this specific to purposes of church discipline. Although it's still considered a serious transgression, if you are in a same-gender relationship, a same-gender marriage, if you're specifically gay married, it is no longer considered apostasy for purposes of church discipline. And I think that's key that we need to pay attention to. And then Oaks provides a press release through the church news. This is also on the record if you want to read through it individually. He says, while church leaders still consider same-gender marriage by a member to be a serious transgression, it will not be treated as apostasy for purposes of church discipline. Instead, and this is the second part that I think is super important, immoral conduct in heterosexual and homosexual relationships will be treated the same way. So Oaks, the bearer of the news, the person who is speaking on behalf of the church, rolling this out to the general membership on conference weekend, says heterosexual and homosexual relationships will be treated the same way. So why are we excommunicating gay Latter-day Saints who choose to occupy a pew, who choose to show up every Sunday, who want callings? That's what I want to talk about. And that's what tomorrow is going to be about as we discuss Jeremy and Randy's situation, where they were excommunicated a month after they were married. So interestingly enough, I mean, that was kind of a lead in, because buried deeper within the church's handbook is a couple of caveats, a couple of loopholes for the church. And one of those is in section 38.6.5, where the church has now eliminated completely that heterosexual or homosexual marriages are no longer considered apostasy. But what they then bury deep inside of the chastity and fidelity section, which are two new sections that they create months later. So this was April 2019. In fact, a year later. I think that's important to point out, that Oaks makes this statement in April of 2019 at the General Conference pulpit. Then in July of 2020, the handbook is updated. So a full year later and a few months later, they come in and they finally update what this actually means. So if you remember, we were in limbo. There were so many things going on. The Provo BYU Honor Code, they updated the honor code to reflect this language that homosexual and heterosexual relationships will be treated in the same way. And if you remember, there were BYU students who were standing around the Brigham statue, kissing and holding hands and being affectionate. And that sent Latter-day Saints through the roof into orbit, because here they were in essence defiling the Lord's great university. But BYU updated their honor code as a reflection of what was just spoken of at conference. But here we are, in finally the handbook is updated. A new section is added, chastity and fidelity section, and they start outlining some of these terms. And I think, in my personal opinion, we're calling them loopholes, because they specifically say, and I quote, physical intimacy between husband and wife is intended to be beautiful and sacred, and it's ordained of God for the creation of children. So then they further push, and this is similar language that we remember in the proclamation, but they further push by saying only a man and a woman who are legally and lawfully wedded in God's sight. And I think this is really interesting, because if you're legally and lawfully wedded in the sight of God, so they are defining what marriage should look like within the handbook. Violations of the law of chastity are very serious. Those involved in the misuse of the sacred power may be, a church membership council may be necessary for these members. So they now specifically create, and this is in section 38.6.5 for those of you who do want to follow along, but the church membership council may be necessary if a member has had sexual relationships outside of a marital relationship authorized by God's law. So they're adding this in, such as same-sex relations. So they specifically say, if you have been in a relationship, same-sex relationship, that is now grounds for an excommunication. If you are in a form of marriage or partnership that is not authorized by God's law, that's a reference again to God's law, such as, now instead of just being married, I want you to pay attention to these three key things. It's not just marriage anymore, such as cohabitation, civil union, partnerships, or same-sex marriages. Boom, 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 boom. Those are all excommunicatable now. So I'm wondering, like, why did we even have April 2019? Why did we just dump the November 2015 policy and say that same-sex relationships are no longer considered apostasy and no longer would be excommunicatable, when you would add right back into the into the July 2020 handbook, the literal language that says a partnership that is not authorized by God, such as cohabitation, civil unions, partnerships, and same-sex marriage. I'd love for the church to speak up. Like, I would really love an answer to this. So then, buried even further in that same section is this little token that says that stake presidents and bishops have the opportunity to make this decision on their own. That this is their opportunity to use personal revelation. And then there is another section that was added, 38.6.16. And it says, as a doctrinal principle based on the scriptures, the church affirms that marriage between a man and a woman is essential to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of his children. If you know the proclamation, you know that sounds so familiar. The church also affirms that God's law defines marriage as the legal and lawful union between a man and a woman. And then the last line, only a man and a woman who are legally and lawfully wedded as husband and wife should have sexual relations. Any other sexual relations, including those between persons of the same sex, are sinful and undermine the divinely created institution of, you've got it right, the family. As if same-sex couples cannot have families. Unbelievable. So this is what we're talking about. I want to just jump into some of your comments. Emily says, LGBTQ people are not offered a clear path to the return to the presence of God. The plan of salvation does not apply to them. This leads to deep depression, shame, and suicide. I agree. Just to add on top of that, and I don't want to deviate from our little discussion here, and thank you for those who are still following along with us and participating. But in the the 2006 interview that Elders Wickman and Oakes gave in Church PR, they specifically said, if you're gay and you're struggling with the thought of being gay, you don't need to worry. In the next life, this will be taken away from you. If it's pressuring you now today, just know that tomorrow it could all go away. Once you die, it all goes away. And to me, listening to that and reading that that's the official statement of the church, that wasn't just a comment that was made off to the side. Oakes and Wickman sat down with Church PR and staged this question and answer event. And Elders Wickman and Oakes, the message they want to tell our young LGBTQ youth is that if you don't like who you are, tomorrow, if you were no longer living, this could all go away and it doesn't exist in the next life. And I think that's so detrimental. And I think that's terrible. And it goes right along with what you're saying there, Emily. It leads to deep depression and suicide. Sam, from the church, gay marriages aren't marriage, therefore we can still discriminate against them, even if they're 100% monogamous and waited until marriage to make love. You're absolutely right. And I know chaste relationships, where same gender relationships where they kept their vows of celibacy until the wedding night, and the church still treats them exactly the same as they should be treating those relationships the same as heterosexual relationships, right? So again, I didn't want to make this forever long. It's already been here about 45 minutes. But I want to just let you know that tomorrow at 3:00, we are going to premiere Jeremy and Randy's story. Jeremy Adriano and Randy Wellbaum are two gay Latter-day Saints. Well, they're no longer Latter-day Saints. They're gay ex-Mormons because the church excommunicated them from their congregation because they chose to be there. And when we talk about this, and I know it's going to be a fascinating discussion, because Jeremy and Randy were attending, and this is pre-COVID also, or COVID. Jeremy and Randy were attending each of their Zoom ward meetings. And really the way this started for them is they wanted to do a special musical number for their ward on the ward Zoom. They both are music majors. Randy's got an incredible voice. Jeremy plays the piano like nobody's business, which is, typical of the gays, right? stereotypical, but we have talents to offer to the church. And these two had some incredible musical talents that they were offering to their ward. And they met with the bishop to ask if they could do a special musical number. And the bishop immediately turned that interview into an opportunity to bash them for their relationship. And then said, I think we're going to need the stake president to decide whether or not you can do the special musical number. And so they thought they were going into the meeting with the stake president with the intention of getting an approval to do the special musical number for the ward Zoom service. But that's not what the stake president had in store. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what the stake president said and their reaction to that, where they obviously felt sidelined and sold kind of a bill of goods. And we want to discuss that. So that's going to happen tomorrow. Please, please, please share it. You'll see on our YouTube and Facebook pages kind of an advertisement that's going to show up for this episode. Please just give it a like and share it and comment and click the interested or going button so you can participate in it when it goes live. And then after, we're going to do a little Q&A. We did take a number of questions as well, so we'll answer some questions. But if you have some questions for Jeremy and Randy, and I think one of the most prominent questions, or the most popular question that I keep getting as I talk about their story and their experiences, why would a gay couple who obviously know what the church teaches against gay people want to attend church, want to be a Mormon? And we talk about that, and we're going to jump into that. Why do people like Randy and Jeremy want to be active Latter-day Saints? And we're going to discuss that. All right, so that's kind of the overall gist of what I wanted to discuss on this live. But I also wanted to highlight the importance of realizing that this isn't just a story about Randy and Jeremy, but there are 11 other couples who have reached out to me to say this is happening to us also. And kind of a sidetrack of this podcast episode is something that I've been working on and trying to really get to the heart of what's happening here. I want to try to figure out who the players are at 50 North Temple, because what I'm seeing is a really consistent and almost verbatim use of this excommunication power. And here's the three things that it gives you. So those who are in same-sex marriages who are either active in church, less active, semi-active, not even close to the church at all, they're all getting the same type of treatment. And it usually goes like this. First, the bishop will contact them just as the friendly, hey, I'm the bishop, or we haven't spoken in years, let's discuss something, come in. And often those messages are disregarded. It's quickly followed up by the stake president, who jumps in and says, you have three options. And we don't even get into like sit down meetings. The stake president is asking, the very first question they ask is, are you married? And if the couple says yes, the second question they ask is, are you intimate in that relationship? So interesting, like the church is so involved in people's sex lives. Are you intimate in your relationship? And obviously, I would think that the overwhelming majority of these gay couples would say yes. Then the stake president offers these couples, and I've confirmed it with all 11, three options. One is that they divorce or dissolve the marriage. They've been using the word dissolve the marriage frequently, and which leads me to believe that somewhere by an area authority or a first presidency note, they are sending these out to stake presidents saying, as chapels are opening up, as COVID restrictions are lifting, we need to start purging. We need to start cleansing our wards. And the fact that they're using similar language and the very three methods or questions leads me to believe that this is coming from something greater than a stake president or a bishop. I'm almost certain it's coming from an area authority, and I'm almost certain I know what the name of that area authority is. You need to dissolve your marriage or divorce your partner and become single and celibate. Then you can return to full fellowship in the church. So what they will do is disfellowship you, what was called the disfellowshipment, give you membership restriction. So that's option number one. Option number two is that, so So dissolve your marriage, become single and celibate, and return to full fellowship over time via some type of disfellowshipment. Option number 2 is they're asking the same gender couple who are Latter-day Saints to personally resign their membership. So resignation in lieu of excommunication. If you don't want to be excommunicated, resign your membership on your own. The third option is to attend a excommunication or membership withdrawal council. We've seen it. We saw it with Natasha Helfer. We've lately seen it over and over and over again. We just saw it with Randy and Jeremy. And so those are the 3 options you're given. It's interesting, if you are a high-profile Latter-day Saint, if you have any opportunities in media, if you have influence, if you're a social media influencer, you're given a 4th option. And that is that if you choose to go public with your story, and if you talk about the fact that you're being excommunicated or even been visited by your stake president or bishop with the goal or the discussion of excommunication, they will excommunicate you without a big formal hearing. So if you speak about it in public, just fast track your way straight to excommunication. So those are the things I want to talk about. Again, I want to know, like, where is Christ in all of these excommunications? And I want the general public to see what's happening behind the scenes, because fortunately, I'm in a position to be able to interact with so many people in this space, and some of this in private, in anonymity, which is important to some of these gay couples. But this is happening in Latter-day Saint chapels and Latter-day Saint communities across the world. And I just think that it's important that we see what's happening. And if you are a mother or a father or a relative of someone who is LGBTQ, are you okay with this? Like, I really think we should have a discussion about this. And I really think we should be on our guard. And if you're an ally in the LGBTQ community and you're still attending church services and you're raising your hand to the square to sustain church leaders, are you sustaining this portion of Mormonism? Are you saying that I believe that our church leaders are justified in excommunicating Latter-day Saints who want to pray, pay, and obey and want to attend services? I think that's important to talk about, and I think that's a message that we need to highlight. So again, tomorrow at 3:00, we're going to highlight Jeremy and Randy's story, and I hope that you'll join us, that you'll participate with us. All right. I kind of left off on the comments. I just wanted to see if there's anybody else joining us that has something to say. As a practicing Episcopalian, I do not understand how a church can be justified in judging others. How many of those elders or decision makers have been married more than once? That's a biblical principle. And it's just, we could do a whole nother podcast episode discussing polygamous marriages posthumously, or when being sealed to multiple women. Is it true that God has decided to withhold the keys from gay church members to prevent gay sealings? And this is a decision from God himself, not a church leader decision. Yeah, within Mormonism, yes. And it's interesting where there were some statements from Oakes, and Packer even said some of this, and so did Ballard, that we have a place. There is a place for every gay member of the church. And there's a place for if you're gay and a member of the church, we even have callings for you. But again, those are then segregated out. And there are certain callings that are prevented, that are that certain gay members of the church are prohibited from holding. If you jump back into the On the Record project, you can download that at LatterGayStories.org/record, for those of you who were asking about that. In that document, On the Record, there was a 1980s memorandum that Elder Oakes wrote. And not only did he say that gay Latter-day Saints should be precluded from membership, from participating in certain callings in the church, but he went even further to say we should keep gay members from school jobs, from primary, from Boy Scouts. Like, we shouldn't have gays actively involved anywhere where there are children, because that's a threat to the children. And so that has still been perpetuated within Mormonism today, that these Latter-day Saint these gay members of the church are stigmatized and ostracized over something that they didn't choose. And the church is now finally at a place where they're willing to admit that being gay is not a choice. Lisa says, for the people who understand, this is an earthquake and a tsunami. I think this is kind of if the church indeed is trying to separate the wheat from the tares by weeding out gay Latter-day Saints, then this does rock the very foundation of Mormonism. And like I said earlier in the broadcast, there are two great reasons, in my opinion, that people leave the church. One is church history. Two is LGBTQ issues. The way the church treats LGBTQ people does not merge or marry or reflect the real lived experiences of family members of gay Latter-day Saints. Matthew just talks about the precision effort to excommunicate Latter-day Saints, and I don't believe that it's just by happenstance. I absolutely think that there's a purge happening, and it's absolutely 100% coordinated. All right. So Aniko says, I feel like they say we have a place for you in the church, meaning that the church looks at the gay Latter-day Saints and they say, we have a place for you in the church as long as you don't act on being gay. And that's like, and I would love to reverse the discussion and say, perfect. Like I have a place for you in the church, Bishop, if you stop acting so heterosexual. If you, Bishop, will go marry a man, then you can continue being a bishop, or you can continue in full fellowship of the church. And I know how cringeworthy that is to a Latter-day Saint when you turn their doctrine against them, or a bishop who is trying to excommunicate, or a stake president, when you turn that against them, how difficult it is for them to grasp that. Anyway, again, I want to thank you. We have a couple hundred people who are joining us on both platforms, on Facebook and YouTube. Continue to share some of your thoughts, and please share this live that we just did, and allow other people to join into the conversation. I'm happy to continue on the chat side of it to kind of answer your questions about what I know in some of these purges that are happening. I do want to highlight some stories. So if you or someone that you know has received a knock on the door or a letter from a stake president, and you are in a same sex relationship, a marriage, cohabitation, or just a relationship, I'm very interested in that discussion. And I can 100% keep your story private. I do just want to try to nail down as many experiences as possible. I really want to try to better understand the motives of the church and what they are trying to do. This is when this started happening, we had some resources. I'm going to be 100% candid, and I probably shouldn't even discuss this, but pre-COVID, there were a couple high-profile excommunications that were happening among gay Latter-day Saints, and we fortunately had some connections within the church, general authority connections, myself and others who had general authority connections that were able to stop those excommunications from happening just with a simple phone call from a general authority back to a stake president or an area authority. We have tried to use some of those outlets today, and we are stopped at the pass, which again leads me to believe that this is not a random stake president or bishop in handfuls of areas throughout Zion leading these excommunications, but indeed this is a coordinated effort, and it's happening at the heart of Mormonism at 50 North Temple, and it's being distributed out from there. And I think the Latter-day Saints and our community, both communities, need to understand what's happening. Great. Again, thank you for joining us on this live. Thank you for your comments and what you've been able to contribute to it. Yeah, it is. Rebecca just says it's a wake-up call for all of us who hope things were getting better for our LGBTQ people in the church. Absolutely. I also was in that camp that believed that the rescinding of the November 2015 policy was monumental in that it would create better relationships and build bigger and stronger bridges between the LDS and LGBTQ community. And the reality of that was that the church removed that harmful language from the front page of that handbook but they buried it right back into subsections. And again, if you wanted to go back and read those subsections, it's section 38.6.5 in the handbook. And then they buried another part of that in 32.6.12 and 38.6.16. So they took the November 2015 policy, they diced it up in 3 separate sections, and then they just included them as subsections in other parts of the handbook. But they didn't really rescind anything, except they took it off of one page and put it out into multiple other spaces. Yeah, Devin, thank you. I'm glad you jumped in here, Devin. I was actually called on the carpet one time, and I'll admit this, in a Facebook post, someone said, does anybody even know a gay Latter-day Saint couple that is actively attending church that isn't being persecuted? And I wasn't aware of anyone except for Devin and his husband. They are one couple that I had completely forgot about. And I'm sad because I know them. But Devin and his husband do attend in a Salt Lake ward. They, and as just Devin has posted, no discipline yet. But I would absolutely be interested in hearing if that does change. All right, y'all. Thank you for participating. Again, tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. Mountain Time, we are going to sit down with Jeremy Adriano and Randy Wellbaum. They are the 2 gay Latter-day Saints who were excommunicated a month after they were married. As soon as they come home from their honeymoon, their stake president was eager to nix them and excommunicated them. And they're going to talk about it. And it is sad, and it's hurtful, and the whole experience is mind-boggling. It's important for me to get this story out here. And that's why I wanted to do this live today, is just to help plug that and promote that and let you know that it should be on your radar. When you do see it post on the LatterGayStories page, whether it's on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, please share it. And for those of you who aren't subscribed, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page if you're not following or liking it. And if audio podcasts are your jam, the LatterGayStories podcast is available everywhere you find or listen to your favorite audio podcasts. So iHeartMedia, Stitcher, Apple, Google Play, all of those podcast channels have the LatterGayStories podcast. And sharing it, subscribing to the channel, and even giving us a rating does monumental wonders. We're, just constantly climbing in the charts, and our viewership and listenership is just increasing. Our latest episodes are getting between 20 and 30,000 views or downloads. I don't know 20 or 30,000 gay Mormons. I don't know 20 or 30,000 gay Latter-day Saints. So somewhere out there is a community of people who are interested in this topic. And so I want to help continue expanding this reach. So again, thank you to all of you who have participated in this live and for your questions and comments. And again, I want to invite you tomorrow to participate in our discussion. Because it is so it's unbelievable. It's disheartening that this is where Mormonism is going with some of the finest. And I've said this time and time again, the Mormon church is losing some of its best and brightest, not only those who identify as LGBTQ, but their family members as well. And for what reason? To the Latter-day Saint out there, I ask one question. What do you lose by inviting and giving opportunity to a gay Latter-day Saint in your community? What do you fear by having a gay couple attend church services with you? And who really loses when you excommunicate these Latter-day Saints? Where's Christ in all of this? I hope we can answer some of those questions tomorrow, and I hope that you give us an opportunity to kind of plead this case and really help bring this message to Latter-day Saints who are trying to better understand. Again, thank you for giving us an hour. I didn't think it was going to go on this long, but thanks to so many of you who participated. We will catch you tomorrow on the other side with the episode with Jeremy Adriano and Randy Wellbaum. Thanks, everyone.